Yes, who do we have on the line?
Who do you think?
Um, let's see. Erie Vaughn.
Yeah, what's your second guess?
Glenn Danzig. Erie, we got you?
Is this Sean?
Yeah, this is Sean.
Hi, Sean. Siri. How are you doing?
Hey, great, man. Erie, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm a huge fan, so this is very cool.
Yeah, no problem, man.
Yeah, I just, I wanted to, I mean, your history is pretty extensive. I mean, if you look at your discography, I mean, there's the stuff that you're known for, there's the other stuff, there's like compilations you've been on. Like, let's talk about like when you first started playing, going way back to Rosemary's Babies.
Yeah, so what do you want to know?
I want to know, like, what made you start out as a drummer and then stop playing? Because the way that you played on Rosemary's Baby seemed like something that would be, very Misfits style drums, and then you just never went back to that.
Well, I mean, it wasn't necessary. I mean, I'd spent most of my time, waiting for the Misfits you need a new drummer. And when I, eventually got the call, I was already doing Rosemary's Baby. So it was kind of like I was always kind of in the wings waiting for that. And Doyle was always telling me, why don't you just, play drums? And I had already done drums from when I was a pretty young kid, 9, 10, I don't remember. But it was just like learn the songs. And when they need somebody, then you just step in, So I didn't really want to wait around. And, we were doing, we were into the hardcore scene, and I was working a midnight job for 12 hours a day, so I had a lot of time to write,
Yep.
and so that was basically it. It was going to be whatever needed to be done, and I probably would have picked up the guitar sooner if that was necessary. But drums was like a way to get your aggression out, and we were all angry and. Things were a little bit different back then,
Yeah.
So, not for nothing, but if you were, in town or you could get to rehearsal, then you'd be in the band. It was kind of like a very small gene pool, So if you could show up to rehearsal every day or every other day, you'd be in the band. So it was kind of like that, and just go see what you do. And even when we did Sam Hain and Danzig, it was the same thing. It was just like, if you could show up and maybe drive Clint to rehearsal, that would be fine. So, opportunity, or another word I'm thinking of, well, like you could be there,
Yeah.
It was one of those things. It was, I can't think of the word. I'm sorry.
Did you guys? I mean, at the time when you were doing this, I mean, did you realize that what you were doing was something special and unique, or were there a lot of other bands around at the time that were doing the same kind of stuff?
No, you never think about that. If you think about that, you're dead.
Yeah.
Like it was just something that needed to be done, and we all had something to say. So it was basically like following other people's leads. Like the Misfits and Minor Threat and a bunch of other great bands that were putting out their own records, and it made sense that we could do that too, so it wasn't that big a deal, so we just recorded and put out records and, tried to just keep writing better songs and all that stuff,
Now, how many copies of the Rosemary's Babies record was there pressed?
We pressed 1,000 copies. That's it. I still probably have like a couple hundred laying around. They didn't really sell that well.
Well, you didn't do a lot of shows, right? I mean, you had only done, what was it, seven or eight
We did
shows?
like 5 or 6 shows, which seems kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would really give a rat's ass if it hadn't gone on to be Sam Hain and then on to Danzig, So,
Yeah.
It's nice that people are interested in that stuff. And, it sounds good. We put out the CD, and it sounds really good and stuff. It's just where we were at the time, and it had to be done.
So you're responsible for obviously taking some of the most iconic images of the Misfits going back, I mean, to the early days. It was just, I mean, I've read the book, and I'm sure anybody who's a big fan has read the book. Is there a lot more photographs from that time period, or was everything put into the book?
Oh, no, there's a lot more.
A lot more.
Yeah, we got like 1,000 images, that were, you know, because the negatives are like, you know, 30 plus years old,
Hmm.
that they get, you know, damaged and, you know, dust on them and all this stuff, and you have to really work at them. But now with the digital stuff, I can take some of the photos and, you know, instead of like touching up the, you know, the dust marks and stuff, I can just, you know, go in and, you know, fix stuff. And my manager, Laura J., does all that stuff, and she's really brought some of these photos that I didn't even realize that, you know, I had. And she's like, "Oh, what about this one?" I'm like, "Well, work on it, you know."
Yeah.
So no, we didn't think anything was special or anything. We were just doing what we did, you know.
So it was one of those things where, I mean, I've always been fascinated by the fact that you started out, I mean, you went to school with Steve Zing, you went to school with Doyle, you were around at the same time. And it's just amazing how it just lined up where you took, you know, some amazing photographs of them. You were around at the time, and then just, you know, everything lined up perfectly for you to wind up in Samhain. How did it wind up happening where the Misfits were splitting up? Like, did you know that the Misfits were splitting up and that Glenn was going to do something else, or was it just?
Yeah, well, you know, Glenn and I were talking on the phone a lot. You know, after I did the initial photos of the band, and then, you know, I was making a lot of T-shirts back then. You know, so it was always, you know, like cool T-shirts nobody could get and stuff. So Glenn, you know, like Doyle would tell me, "Oh, Glenn really likes this Bela Lugosi, you know, thing, or this, you know, whatever you're doing now, and he wants a couple of copies." And I'm like, "Okay, fine, you know, no big deal." And it was just one of those things, you know, that just I was doing what I was doing, and you know, if Glenn wanted to be your friend, you know, back then it was like, oh, you know, this guy's done a bunch of stuff, and you know, it's cool to hang out with the Misfits, you know, so it really wasn't that big a deal. It kind of just fell into your lap, you know.
Yeah. Well, you were like, I mean, kind of like a jack of all trades, because I mean, between doing the shirts and you know, probably some of the printing and stuff for like the posters and things like that, and just, you know, all different stuff. It's like, it's just amazing to me. It's like how you started out and then you wound up in Samhain. It was like you could do it all, you know.
Yeah, well, you know, like my dad would say, jerk of all trades, you know.
Yeah.
But no, that's just the way it worked. You know, that's the way it worked out.
So did he call you and say, hey, you know, you want to start a new band, or, you know, it was just something that?
Yeah. Well, we had been talking, you know, after a while, and he had told me, you know, that he wanted to, you know, we both complained about our bands, you know, and that, like, you know, you couldn't get certain guys to show up for rehearsal, and there was always a problem, you know. That's why there were so many different drummers and guitar players in the Misfits and stuff. It's just like you start out with a basic idea of what you want to do, and then before you know it, somebody says, well, I can't show up to rehearsal because, you know, my girlfriend won't, you know, do this or that, or,
Yep.
you know, they couldn't get there, you know. So it's just one of those things where eventually it was just like whoever could show up and, you know, flesh out the songs and stuff, that's you know, that's why so many guys from Lodi were in the Misfits and stuff. You know, it's just one of those things. It's like, yeah, well, I've got a song I want to do now, so we can't wait for somebody to come in from New York or, you know, from out of state or whatever. So if there's some guy, you know, right in town that can help us get to where we need to go, and that's what we had to do.
So you were the first member of what became Samhain at that point then, right? Like you were the first one that Glenn had picked to do the new project with?
Yeah. No, I was, you know, we talked about it extensively and what he wanted, and we agreed on a lot of things, you know. So I was playing drums at the time, so it was just like, okay, well, you know, I'll come down and I'll play guitar and you play drums, and we'll try to work this thing out. And then it got to, you know, because he was trying to do something different from the Misfits, that, you know, I was just like, you know, I can't handle this on the drums because, you know, people have natural timing,
Yep.
you know, and it was outside my natural timing. So I was just like, yeah, you know, and then he said, why don't you play bass? And I was just like, okay, you know, I think I could do that, you know. So it was just that. And then, you know, Steve was there, and we went to school together and stuff, and And he was like, what do you think about Steve? And I'm like, well, he's a much better drummer than I am. So, yeah, why not? So it just kind of went that way. And then, we eventually got, Damien, and he lived only like 10 minutes away. So, that made a lot of sense to us.
Was there instant chemistry right away when you guys all played together, or was it just something that had to be worked on a lot?
I don't think there was a lot of chemistry before we got to Danzig, but Chuck and John.
Yep.
Like Pete was into Johnny Thunders and like a lot of punk rock stuff, like a lot, what I think is like sloppy playing, like rock and roll, this, that, and the other thing, which is fine, and Steve was into, a lot of more of the new wavy kind of, the Buzzcocks and, Generation X and things
Yep.
like that. And, so everybody had something to bring to the table. And then we, of course we had Glenn, with having, he's almost 10 years older than all of us. So he already had all this experience, so it was kind of like, well, Glenn's bringing down a new song and, it's fun and it's good, so we didn't rock the boat,
So do you remember going in to actually record the Initium record? Do you remember those sessions?
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember sitting next to, because this is a really small studio, and it was in this guy's mom's house. And, like the tapes would be next to the dryer,
Wow.
and we had a really small place to record in. But, yeah, I remember sitting next to Steve, next to the dryer, I think, and saying, well, I can't believe we're in this guy's band, because we had done all the basic tracks for the first, Sam Hain record, Initium, and we had heard Glenn, sing, because, down in my basement, we only had like one amp for him to sing through. And then we heard this stuff and we were like, oh, this is so awesome. Yeah, we were very happy about that.
Was he easy to work with at that time, or was he like, has he always been the same? Like, or did he have like, because I mean, now he's kind of known for being just a very, dark individual. Was he always that way, or was he easier to work with then, or was it just kind of the same?
No, well, like I can go back to the Misfits stuff, and, Glenn did all the mail. He did all the T-shirts. He was the guy that everybody went to, and he had correspondence with a lot of people, and he was the guy that was sort of the face of the band,
Yep.
and it sort of, changed a little bit. He was probably still doing it. He was still making T-shirts and Sam Hain, but when it got to, Danzig time, there was just so much, it like tripled, like the amount of mail you would get, and, and I had the hotline and, phone calls like crazy. So when Glenn couldn't, answer his mail, I would answer the mail, and it just got to be too much of a thing. It's not like it was when like 1,000 people, now it's like 200,000 people,
Yeah.
it's, so something had to be done, so, I took on that responsibility.
How accurate would you say like the early pressing information? Because I mean, from a collector point of view, there's so many like discrepancies as far as like how many of this were pressed and how many of this were made. Like, do you think that the numbers that are known, like example for like Initium, when you guys did the the colored vinyl releases and all that other stuff, like was it actually?
Well, we started doing the that goes back to the Misfit stuff. Glenn did Who Killed Marilyn, and did it on purple vinyl, and then of course the Bullet record was on red vinyl, so it was kind of like a thing that you would create like a like a collector's item or something that would be different, and I remember Glenn putting in records to sell to distributors, and just, I'm going to throw in one of these, like one pink Legacy of Brutality or whatever,
Yep.
or one white Die Die My Darling, so some kid going to a record store, would just pick up one and go home, and all of a sudden it's not black vinyl, it's white vinyl, or it's marbled vinyl. So I really liked that,
Yeah.
just for the hell of it. And it all happened by accident, It was just like, oh, well, we don't clean out the record press. We go from like black to white or black to, red or whatever. And then all the, interim, pressings would have these other colors in them. And we just thought it was fun,
So the plan was even back then to create something that was technically like a collector's item, like even then it was
yeah, but not in a bad way.
Yeah.
It was just because we were both fans of like comic books and collectible items and stuff, and we just thought it would be fun, to just not say anything about it, not till later, and then just put them in there. And just, it was just like, it was kind of like a lottery. You could go buy a record, but you didn't know if you were going to get like a black vinyl copy or a white vinyl copy.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Some of the one of the things I wanted to ask you too was about songs. I mean, there's stories about particular songs existing, outtakes from like the Initium session, stuff like the Howl 2. There's something called the Urge. There's an Archangel with the chimes, like. Does all that stuff exist, and how much of it, how much outtake stuff was there from those sessions?
Well, the Howl was supposed to be a trilogy. It's going to be Howl, the Shift, and the Urge. And we only did, in Samhain, we did the Howl and the Shift, and we never got to the Urge. So, I suppose Glenn had like, like an agenda.
Yeah.
He wanted, trilogies are good, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't actually come out. But I think some of that stuff probably came out in the Unholy Passion record, that was like more tribal and, and I think probably the last part of the, the Howl trilogy might have been, leading us into the Unholy Passion record,
Oh, okay. How about the Archangel version with the chimes?
Yeah, well, I'm not really sure if I heard about that. I mean, I know the story about Archangel, but, I'm not really sure. That it was probably a later version.
Okay. So now, so you recorded the Initium record. You were really happy with the sound of that, and then you guys went out on tour and did, some shows for that, and then Unholy Passion. What happened during the Unholy Passion and then like November Coming Fire that caused, you guys to switch members?
Oh, well, I mean, you know how it is with a band, it's like I told you before, it's like you start off with guys all, on the same page, and then eventually, you grow up and whatever, and maybe you don't want the same things, so members come and go. That's the way they do. And, so it's just like that. It's, either you're in it for the long haul and all the problems that may occur or whatever, or you're not. So, yeah, that's the way it went. It's just one of those things where, somebody just wasn't on the same page, That's all.
Of the three Samhain records, which one's your favorite? Which is the one that?
I like November Coming Fire, my favorite, and I also like the Danzig 3 record, which is something funny about like 3, because that's the third Danzig record and the third Samhain record. So, I really like both of them.
So you did the the November Coming Fire record, and then obviously something took place at that time where, Glenn wound up, signing whatever deal with Def Jam, and it was going to become a new project. But there was some sessions around that time that wound up being released later on during the Final Descent release. Was that something where, how far into that Samhain record were you? Because there's like, I think it's Die with the Demon is one song. There's a few other songs that wasn't on Final Descent. Like, how close to doing, the fourth Sam Hain record were you before it all changed and became Danzig?
Well, we had worked on, by that time, all the other guys were out of the band, so it's just me and Glenn, and I could play drums, and, Glenn could play guitar, and I could play bass or whatever, so it wasn't that big a deal. But by the time we finished that record, we were already working on Lucifuge for Danzig, and it was like 1990, and we had a bunch of demos and some tracks already completed and stuff. So, yeah, we wanted to finish that, but by that time we were more interested in, what Danzig was doing, So we kind of left it on the back burner, and we eventually released it as the Final Descent,
Yep.
So it was a little bit different, like we could say, we don't need like a drummer, we don't need whatever, we can just do whatever we want,
Yeah.
So we're moving along.
What exists, as far as, there's some stuff that's out there as far as like Sam Hain video footage, but is there anything that you have that's like never been seen before or something like in your archives?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of Danzig footage, because at the time, I only had my one camera when we were doing Sam Hain, and it was my dad's camera, and I was afraid to bring it on tour because it would get broken or lost or whatever.
Yep.
So that's one of the things that I don't have a lot of photos of Sam Hain. I wish I would have done that. But yeah, it's just one of those things. You miss opportunities. Like when we were on tour with Typo Negative, and they were opening up for us, I was like, I was so busy going out there and watching Pete and all those guys, do the songs that I didn't take any pictures, and it's probably what happened, during Sam Hain,
It was just one of those things. So
yeah, depends on what mindset you're in,
So, one thing I always wondered, and just from because I've done several interviews, like I've done an interview with Steve Zing, and I've had some correspondence with Damien, and I've always wondered why it was, and I don't even know if you can answer this question, but I always wondered why it was that some members were let go, and Glenn kept you. Was it a friendship thing, or was it like a musicianship thing that kept you guys together to go from Sam Hain to finally doing Danzig?
Well, I've said this before. It's like when you're a musician, you want to play with the best people you can possibly play with, and that's the main thing. It doesn't really have to do with anything else. It's just like, if this guy's better than I am, I want to play with this good guy or whatever. It doesn't matter if it's a guitar player or a singer or whatever. And that was pretty much it. That's why things changed, because you have to keep moving and changing, and you have to get better. And if you're not going where we're going, then then that's it. So.
Did you believe this was going to break the
we're
whole
always
time?
Trying to be better.
Did you, like the entire time, throughout Sam Hain and then into Danzig? Because the band Danzig, it did start getting bigger, but it really blew up when the Mother 93 thing happened. But did you always believe that it was going to happen? Like, did you just always know that at some point this is definitely going to break?
Oh yeah, not for nothing, but Glenn and I used to talk about it, and he would say, you got to be an egomaniac to be in a band, and I always knew that we would conquer the world or whatever. We didn't get there, but that was one of the reasons Glenn and I were so close. It was just like, yeah, it's you and me against the world. We're going to do what we want and fuck everybody else.
That's awesome.
That was the attitude we had from day one all the way through.
So you said Danzig 3 is your favorite release of the Danzig record you were on?
Yeah, that's true.
Why? What is it about that record that really captures it for you? Do you think that was just like the pinnacle of the band?
Well,
or was just...
I remember Glenn telling me that he liked the Misfits' Night of the Living Dead, and I said, well, that record's horrible. He said, yeah, but that was the best time in the band. Like, everybody was together, and I kind of I likened that to the Danzig 3 record. because we did 14 tracks in 4 days, you know,
Wow.
and they were all one takes, two takes, and we were really tight. And I really liked that record because of that, you know, and you know, it's one of those things, you know, we were so well rehearsed and we knew the songs, you know, and then 14 tracks in like 4 days, that's
Crazy.
unheard of.
Yeah, that's crazy. Especially since there's a lot of production on that record too. I mean, there's a lot of, depth to that record. It's not like a punk record where it sounds like it was recorded in such a short amount of time. Like How the Gods Kill has, a huge sound to it.
No, we had plenty of time to record it. It's just that the fact that we didn't need that much time, you know. So we did all the basic tracks, and some of them came out, later on the Lost Tracks of Danzig or whatever. But yeah, we had done all the tracks, and then I remember me and Rick and Glenn going down to Tower Records on Sunset in California and saying, well, we've got like a whole day in the studio. Why don't we do like a cover song? And that's where we did Buick McCain, an old T-Rex song. But we had already finished everything. All we had to do was mix. Now, it was good. It was a really good experience. And like I said, the reason I think it's one of my favorite records is because we were so good,
Yeah.
at the time.
Oh, you're a monster band. I mean, it was an unbelievable lineup. I mean, even if you watch footage from that time period or listen to it or whatever, or if you got to see it, I mean, I got to see it. It was an unbelievable band.
Well, you got to remember, it was like one take. Like we didn't bullshit it. We did like one great take, and that's what you hear.
So when you look back on the Sam Hain years now, like, is that something? I mean, I know you're obviously proud of the Danzig lineup, which I totally agree. But is Sam Hain you look back on really fondly, or does it just look like an early thing that you did? And
no, I don't really think about it that much. It was, I was pretty young at the time, and we were just doing what we were doing, and I thought it was a great thing, because it would make you excited about, the next song or what we're going to do, So, no, it was very exciting, but, I don't, maybe Glenn thought about it, but I certainly didn't. It was just like, you just keep going forward, and that was it. We really didn't think about it, or if anybody was going to, like, even care about it, years from now.
Yeah. Was there pressure on you guys? Like, once Mother broke, was there a lot of, label pressure or something where it was like they wanted another Mother, out of you? Or was it just they left you to record what you wanted to record? Because, I mean, Danzig 4 has a totally different sound, at least to me, than to the first three. I mean, it sounds like a totally different, time period. Was it something where...
Well, yeah, I remember that. And, I remember when we started doing Danzig 4, and I would just look at Glenn and go, like, I know what's going on. Like, I get this. But Chuck and John didn't really get it. I remember John saying, well, these songs aren't finished. They're like demo songs. I'm like, yeah, but that's not the point. I remember saying, I totally get this, and that's why I always tell people that, Danzig 4 is like a Sam Hain record, and it was like that. Maybe a little bit, maybe 50%, There was also Going Down to Die, which was kind of a Sam Hain song, a kind of Danzig song, and, the other stuff. But, I could feel that same feeling, that it doesn't matter. Song, needs what it wants, and it's not that big a deal. And it doesn't have to be verse, chorus, guitar lead, all that, It should just be what the song wants. And that's where I think we were at that time.
There's something that a lot of people have always wondered too was, I don't know if it's a rumor or whatever, but whether or not you guys re-recorded some of the tracks. I know on Holy Passion there's definitely been some re-recording, but like on the Misfits Collection 2, they've said that like you and Glenn did some stuff on that. Like, is there any truth to that, or was that just...
Well, in hindsight, and even then, I wasn't happy about that, because he wanted to erase tracks or do whatever. And then John was joining the band, and he was, like a different guitar player. so it's like, oh, you do this like on Halloween or whatever. But I'm not a big fan about changing history. I would rather have it be the way it was when it was recorded. So I'm kind of on the fence about that. You shouldn't really change things because that's the vibe you had at the time you recorded it. And, I feel that way, but, I don't think Glenn feels that way.
So you did your final run with Danzig, decided it was time for you to leave the band. You announced that you were leaving the band, and then like everybody was growing unhappy or whatever within the lineup and stuff, and it was time to move on. What was your next plan at that point? Were you thinking about just putting together another band, or was it just about trying to do a solo record, or what was your thoughts at that time?
Well, I had, I'd been writing a bunch of songs, and I was trying to get better at being a songwriter. And then, I did backup vocals and stuff for, Danzig and stuff, but it's a little harder to, play and sing at the same time. So I had to figure out how I was going to do that. And it was really not that big a deal. It was just like, oh, we're just going to move from the next thing, and you don't really think about it. You just do what you do.
How is it? I mean, it's pretty remarkable if you think about it, because you started out as a drummer. I'm just fascinated by the fact you started out as a drummer and then said, okay, I'm going to play bass, and then it's like, okay, well, now I'm going to play guitar, and now I'm going to sing, and I'm going to have a voice like Jim Morrison. It's like, it's kind of amazing that you are able to do so many different things. Usually people only have this, one or two thing that they can do, but it's like you can pretty much do everything yourself, including print your own shirts.
Yeah, well, you don't think about that stuff. You just do what you do. And I've been painting for 15 years, maybe longer, and all this other stuff, and I'm still writing songs and doing all this, and then I have to do all these interviews and all these things. You want to, hear about the old days and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So, my day is pretty crowded, but, you just have to keep doing what you do. I don't really think about it,
And you've done 5 solo albums so far. And I'm assuming you're working on your 6th one.
Yeah. No, I've got some good songs, and I'm moving back to Nashville, so I'm going to have a bunch of guys playing with me, and I really look forward to that because not for nothing. There's nothing like getting in a room with 4 or 5 guys and working on a song, and it turns into something else, and that's the stuff that I really like. That's what we had with Danzig. It's just so good. You don't know why it's happening, but it's great at the end of the day.
So now, the Misery Perfectum thing, is that something that you're still working on? Is it going to be a film? Is it going to be a book? Is there any news on that?
I have a next book. That's my main thing to do. I want to put all the photos in a pristine condition. The people will go, oh, this is awesome, But the film and all that, it's not exactly under my control. It's kind of I tell them what I want, and, so it's not, it'll come out eventually.
Yeah. But any of the footage, will there be an accompanying, DVD that'll come with it, or is that just wishful thinking?
Well, I have mostly Danzig footage,
Which would be amazing. There's not very
much.
Like
I said, I didn't bring my camera around during Samhain. I wish I would have. But I have tons of Danzig footage, and it's so funny and it's so great. Glenn, you never thought, and all these other people that are famous that used to work for us,
Yeah.
And it's going to be great. But, if it doesn't come out, it's not really my fault.
Anything? Did you film you guys recording those records, like Lucifuge or How the Gods Kill, or anything?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah, I have all that.
Oh wow, that would be cool to see, in the studio actually making those.
Yeah,
records.
It is awesome. There's so much fun stuff. I used to put the camera in the control room, because if you put it in the room where you're doing the basics, it would just be like drums. So I would put it in the control room, and then I could hear like all the tracks.
Oh wow.
You know, so yeah, I have all that. You know, like tons of that shit.
Oh, that
Yeah, I
would be
know it's
amazing.
awesome, right?
Oh, I can only imagine how I could watch that like
Yeah,
for
I know
hours.
it's fucking awesome. You know, I can remember, you know, recording all that stuff, and it's great. And I want people to see it, you know, because they like it, and I can't sit on it. You know, they should see it. You know.
Well, you're known to be, you know, I've got a few friends of mine who you know have bought some stuff for their collections through you and stuff like that. I mean, you're known to be like in touch with the fans, which I think is great because it's one of those things where you know you share this stuff, which I think is awesome because it's stuff that people would never get to see, like you know one of a kind shirts and you know. I know, like, there's a variation to the Initium lyric sheet and just like really cool things. So thank you for doing that, and I really hope that this footage definitely comes out at some point because that would just be unbelievable to see you guys record those records.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, that's just my way. Maybe it's my mom or something. It's, you know, want to take care of people, and you know, I've got so much stuff that, you know, I can't see like sitting on it.
Yeah.
You know, so if people want to see it, then you know, I'll give it to them. You know.
Awesome.
So as long as I can without getting sued. You know?
Well, yeah, there's that. One of the things that you know, just on a collector purpose, and I've asked everybody, and I figured, you know what, I got to ask you because nobody else seems to know anything about it. Do you know anything about a mask that was inserted into promo copies of Danzig 1? It's a
Oh yeah, I remember you asked me about that.
yeah.
Yeah, that was, you know, I don't know because I don't have one. If I don't have one, you know, I it's a little suspect.
Wow.
Yeah, I haven't seen that until, you know, you showed it to me, and I was just like, you know, I would think that I would have one, you know, but I don't. So I'm sort of on the fence of, you know, maybe they put him in a couple of, you know, copies or whatever, but it seems a little, you know, I don't have one, so.
Do you have so you have a collection of stuff yourself that you just?
Oh yeah, I'm a collector, you know.
That's one of the things I was curious about. What you had in your collection? Like, do you have some? Obviously, you have some one of a kind stuff because I mean, you made a lot of one of a kind stuff. But you do have.
Well, you know, you got to think about how long it's been, and I have a certain amount of things, but there's also a certain amount of things that I want to keep for myself. You know, just for the hell of it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I tend to be a little bit sentimental. You know, so I want to keep like one of the, you know, the Misfit records, you know, and whatever else. But yeah, there's a bunch of shit, you know, that I might have or might not have. But yeah, no, I like history. You know, I'm a big rock and roll fan, you know, and all this stuff. You know, I appreciate, you know, and I understand when, you know, fans, you know, say, well, what about this? What about that? You know.
Yeah.
You know, I try to make them happy.
You know, I've heard the solo records. I actually love Blood in the Body. I think it's a great record. And there's a track on there.
Yeah, well, the songs are good, but you know, like the execution is not that great. But you know, you got to live with it. You know.
That song "Good," the song "Good" that you have is incredible. Like if you recorded that, like, you know, with like a full lineup, that would be a killer song. That's a great song.
Yeah, well, I'd like to do that, you know, eventually. You know, but, you know, I'd rather write another good song, you know, that I can move on, you know. I mean, that was 98, you know, so that's quite a while. But, yeah, I'd like to do some stuff, you know, and my next record is going to be with a full band, and, you know, so it's going to be better.
So that's where you're at now. You're working on this next record, putting out your 6th solo album, and then, you know, hopefully getting Misery Perfectum out, and any chance of you doing any shows or any kind of appearances or anything like that?
Well, I do, you know, the conventions, you know, the horror conventions, you know, and stuff. And, you know, like I said, you know, I get interviews like almost every day, you know, the next book. And, you know, I got a children's book I want to do. And there's a lot of things in the next record. You know, I really want to do the next record because, you know, sometimes, you know, I don't know what it is, but something taps you on the shoulder and says, maybe you should do a new record.
Yeah.
So.
Is it going to be like on the country side of things, or is it going to be a little more on the rock side of things? Like,
you never know what it's going to turn out to be like, but some of the songs, are like really old songs, and it doesn't have to be, the only reason I called the last record kind of country because people kept asking me, what does it sound like? And I said, well, it's kind of country, but it's not. It's more bluesy and, like.
Reminds me of Jim Morrison. It just has that sound to it. It's got like a, you have like.
Yeah,
the tone of your voice.
That's not a bad thing.
That's their tone,
but,
I think, is that.
Yeah, the new record's going to be a little bit different, and I hope to keep, challenging, the audience, and, if they like it, great. If they don't like it, fuck them. Who cares?
So as far as, is there any chance that, you would ever wind up playing with Glenn again? I know there's been Sam Hain reunions and there's been legacy shows and stuff like that. Is there ever a chance that like you and John and Chuck and everybody will get back together on stage and play again?
Well, I always said, same thing with the Misfits reunion. It's like, why don't you get together and make a new record? So I feel the same way about the Danzig thing. It's like, yeah, I'd be fine with that if we can get Chuck and John and we make a new record. And I'd be fine with that because I don't want to go out and just play the hits. And I don't want to play Mother every day. And if we could do a new record, that would be great, And I would be, that would stimulate me and I would be happy about that. So, yeah, I'm totally open to that,
Was there a song that you had recorded with Danzig that you thought, like either you or you and Glenn like thought that like, okay, this, could potentially be a, like a hit song? Because I mean, Mother didn't break for years. So was it something where, was there a song in particular that you thought like, hey, you know what, this song, this is it. This song is going to be the song, and it just wasn't.
Well, I thought that anything was going to be a hit song, and I remember when we were recording it, that Glenn said, oh, well, I don't do that chord, I don't go to that A major chord, in the song, and I was just like, okay, whatever. But this could be a hit song,
yeah,
and it could have been. So, I don't really worry about that, but yeah, that could have been a hit song,
Yeah, because it's curious. I mean, obviously you had, recorded Mother on the first record, and it didn't wind up exploding until what would have been 5 years later, 93. So, yeah, I'd always wondered if there was something in particular you thought might have been a hit. That's cool.
No, I remember when we were working on that song, and Glenn told me, I've got a hit song, and I was just like, okay, whatever, because this is, it's still in the 80s,
Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, whatever, and originally Mother was like more a punk rock song, but it turned into something else. I was just like, okay, whatever, but I didn't know that was going to be a hit song, and then it took like 8 years to be a hit song, I like that song, anyway.
Oh, you never liked Mother?
No.
Did you guys, was there ever a time, I mean, like, was it just like an all for one, type of thing, or did you guys like disagree on particular songs, or was there some songs you didn't like that he liked, or was it just one of those things where you just agreed on everything? Like, how was it, working in the studio and, the writing at that time?
No, what it was, like everybody just, put in their 100%, Chuck and John, and me and Glenn, it was always about like making the best song we could make. And we didn't really have any agenda, I mean, we did work on a couple things that never came out, but it was kind of like, oh, we'll just do this, and see how it works out. I think it was like, at what point, either guy was like, into or whatever. Maybe John wasn't into it. Maybe Chuck wasn't into it.
Yeah.
We just have to go with, whatever's working, try to make the song as best, just try to make the song, flesh out the song and make it as good as we could.
So there's a chance that at some point we might see some of this footage that you were, that you filmed all throughout the tours with the Misery Perfectum release. There's a chance.
Well, yeah, there's always a chance.
We got to make it happen. Something's got to happen. Who are we going to talk to?
Yeah, well, I have that,
Eerie, thank you so much for joining me on the show, man. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope, maybe you should come to Chiller or something, like one of the big horror shows. I mean,
I'm sure I'll do it eventually.
Awesome. Eerie, thank you so much again. And, I wish you all the success. And, I'm a fan for life. So thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thanks, man. It's not a problem.